Hey, so I'm going to be showing you how to make a super simple low poly art style in Blender, and this will help teach you some of the very basics of 3D modeling. Let's first start with the basic controls. To move an object around, select it and then press G. After selecting and pressing G, you can then press X, Y, or Z to move it along one of the three axes. Left click will finish the transformation, right click will reset it, and of course to undo, you just press Ctrl Z. To scale an object, you press S. To scale along a specific axis, you can then press X, Y, or Z, just like with the grabbing function. This also works with the rotation function, which can be activated by pressing R. To rotate the view, you hold and drag with the middle mouse button. To zoom in, you use the scroll wheel, and to pan, you hold Shift while dragging the middle mouse button. One more important shortcut to know is how to get into the edit mode for an object. This is done by selecting the object and pressing Tab. In edit mode, you have control over the faces and vertices of an object. When in edit mode, you can't make any changes to other objects such as the light or the camera. You'll have to exit edit mode for this. Now that we've gone through some of the basics, we can go ahead and begin making our scene. To start, let's delete the default cube. This is done by selecting the cube and pressing X. From there, select delete. We don't need the point light either right now, so let's delete it too. Now press Shift A to bring up the add menu, select mesh, then plane. With the plane selected, scale it up with S, and then hit Tab to go into edit mode. Within edit mode, press A to make sure the entire object is selected, and then right-click on the object and select subdivide. Do this a bunch of times until the object basically looks like it has a bunch of squares on it. Now switch the selection mode from vertices to edges, and then press A once or twice to make sure that nothing on the object is selected. Then mouse over to one of the edges on the plane, and while holding Alt and Shift, you can select an entire edge of the plane at once. Do this for each side of the plane. Now with each side selected, press E to extrude these edges, and while extruding, press Z to make sure that they stay straight during the process. Now we can begin making a mountain. Switch to the selection mode from edges back to vertices, and then select an area on the object where you want the center of the mountain to be. Now turn on the proportional editing tool and make sure the fall off is set to smooth. Now with the point of your mountain selected, press G to grab it and pull it up. You can use the scroll wheel to scale how steep of a slope you want, and press Z to make sure your mountain scales up nice and straight. Now let's make sure our mountain looks more like a mountain and less like a hill. Switch the fall off setting from smooth to random and then grab the mountain again. This should create a bunch of jagged peaks that make it look more like a mountain. Once again, you can adjust the influence of the area by using the scroll wheel. We can also nudge other parts of our object to make the terrain a little rougher around the edges of the mountain. Now let's make a lake. Switch the selection mode from vertices to faces, then press C for circle select, and then select some faces for the lake. When you're done, right-click to toggle out of the circle select. Now with the area of our lake selected, press E to extrude the faces, and press Z to do it along the Z-axis. You can scale these faces in a little bit if you want, but make sure to turn off proportional editing so you don't affect the rest of the object. I don't really like the blocky look of the lake, so let's smooth it out a little bit. Press A once or twice to deselect the lake, and then Shift select each little blocky corner that you'd like to smooth out. Now with each corner selected, press Ctrl B to bevel the edges. Now our lake formation looks a little bit more natural. With our terrain done, we can now work on the materials. Press Tab to exit the edit mode, and then select the checkered sphere icon to switch to a material view. From there, with our object selected, go to the side pane and select the Material tab. Click New to add a new material to our object. There are a bunch of options for this material, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll only be messing with a couple of settings. Click on Base Color and select a color for grass. When you're satisfied, rename the material to grass and hit the plus icon to add another material slot. Now hit New again to add another material, rename it to dirt, and change the base color to a good dirt color. Our mountain object still looks completely green though, so let's change that. With our object selected, tab into edit mode, switch the selection mode to faces, and alt select one of the edges on our lake cliff to select the entire ring. Now select the dirt material and click Assign. Let's also add some dirt to the lower layer of our scenery. Press Ctrl R to add what's called an edge loop, click to add it and put it somewhere near the surface. Then add one more edge loop somewhere deeper. Switch back to face select mode and alt select the edge of the ring like we did for the lake cliffs. Now assign the dirt material to this section of the terrain. Let's make a rock material. Find a good gray color and follow the same selection process to make the bottom layer of our terrain. Now let's finish our lake. Make a new material for the water and find a good color for the water. If you want to make the water more reflective, you can change the roughness to a lower value. Now to add the water material to the lake, make sure you're in edit mode. Press C to toggle on circle select, and select all the faces for the water. If you accidentally select the wrong faces, you can deselect them with the middle mouse button. When you're done, right-click to exit Circle Select and assign the water material to the faces. Make sure no other faces are selected as well. Now that the lake is finished, let's work on the mountain. To make this easier, switch our view to wireframe. This will let us select parts of the mountain that are behind other parts. Now toggle Circle Select and select the portion of the mountain that you want to be rocky. When you are done, assign the rock material and switch back to the material view to see the results. Now do the same thing, only this time with the new material for the snow. If you want to make the terrain look a little bit more natural, you can also Shift-Alt-Select the top edges of the terrain, enable proportional editing with the random fall-off, and nudge the edges up or down a little bit with the grab tool. Let's also make the terrain look a little bit more triangular. You can do this by selecting the little wrench icon in the side pane and then adding a triangulate modifier. When making low poly stuff, triangles look a lot better in my opinion than just squares. Now that our terrain is finished, let's give it some trees. First, make sure you're not in edit mode and then move the terrain off to the side. Now press Shift-A, add mesh, and choose cylinder. Then go into the Add Cylinder tab and change the vertices from 32 to a smaller number such as 6 or 8. This will make the cylinder look more blocky and low poly. Then press S to scale and Z to make sure it only scales along the Z axis. This will be our tree trunk / stump. Press Shift-A to add another mesh, this time it's going to be a cone. Then go into the Add Cone tab and lower the number of vertices to 6 or 8 as well. Now scale and move the cone into position so that it looks like a pine tree. Next, let's parent the cylinder to the cone so that we can move them around a little bit easier. To do this, select the cone and then Shift-select the cylinder. Then press Ctrl-P and select Parent to Object. Now if you move the cone around, the cylinder will move with it. Scale the tree down to a good size and then add some new materials to it. We could add the materials we already made for the terrain, but I'll create separate ones instead. One for the leaves and one for the trunk. Make sure you're in Material View to actually see them. When you're ready to place the trees, bring the terrain back over and scale down and move the tree until it rests on the ground. It's a little hard to tell if the tree is actually on the ground, so in the side tab, select the little camera icon and check ambient occlusion. This will give a nice little shadow under the tree. Now to quickly make more trees, Shift-select both the cone and the cylinder and press Alt-D to duplicate it. Move that tree to a good spot and keep duplicating and moving trees until you're satisfied. Now that our scene is complete, let's move on to the camera and lighting. First, select the camera and press 0 on the numpad. This will put you in the camera's view. Once you're in the camera view, press N to bring up a hidden side panel, select the View tab, and check Lock Camera to View. Now if you rotate, pan, or zoom, you'll be controlling the position of the camera. For this particular scene, I also want to change the camera perspective to like an isometric-ish view. To do this with the camera selected, click on the little camera icon in the side pane and change the type from perspective to orthographic. When this happens, you won't be able to zoom in and out anymore with the scroll wheel while in the camera view, but you can change the zoom by tweaking the orthographic scale. When you find an angle you like, uncheck the Lock Camera to View setting to make sure you don't accidentally change your camera angle when you start moving around your scene again. Now let's switch to the render view. This is what our scene will look like if we were to render out an image to our computer. Right now it's super dark because there are no lights in our scene. So press Shift-A to open up the Add menu and add a sun lamp. Drag it up so we can see it and then drag the little yellow circle on the line to change the angle of the light. Under the light properties, you can change the strength of the light and its color as well depending on the look you want. We can also click on the little world icon to change the background color and its strength, which will also influence the lighting of the scene. When you're ready to save an image of your scene, select the little picture printing icon to go into the Output tab. Here you can change the resolution of the image if you want, as well as what type of image you want it to be. If you want your scene to have a transparent background instead of the blue background that we currently have, you can go into the Render tab, and then within the Film dropdown, you can select Transparent. I'm going to keep the current background visible for this example though. Now simply go to Render, Render Image, or press F12 and Blender will render out an image of what it sees with the camera but without the grid and other icons. When Blender is done rendering, you can save the image by going to Image, Save a Copy, and then saving it to wherever you want on your computer. And that's the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful, and thank you.